I know you've seen the planters, I know you know it's spring, but we're getting kind of tired of the same old planter. So I came up with a great idea for a planter that kind of combines a few. Don't show it yet! What is your problem? So for this, we're using construction grade lumber, and anytime you deal with construction grade lumber, you're going to have a few issues you need to resolve before you start cutting your wood. The first issue is that they are not straight. You shouldn't be able to see my finger right here. The second issue is, and you may not be aware of it, the ends of these boards are not actually square. And it may be hard to tell right now, but this end is actually not square. Not only that, but these are not true to length. These should be 10-foot boards, but they're actually a little bit longer. While that may not be a major deal for this particular project, we still want to correct these issues so they don't turn into a major fiasco later on. Because if we go to cut our angles with this bow in the wood, and that is our reference point, all of our angles will be off. And if I'm pulling my measurements off of these ends, which aren't square, the measurements will be off as well. And that just makes for sloppy woodwork, and we don't want that. Now, I'm not saying it needs to be perfect, but these are issues you want to correct, especially considering all the angles we're going to be cutting. Everything needs to go together nice and tight. So I want to show you how to fix those issues in 2 easy, quick steps. And if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you already know what's coming. But this is such an important step, and I use it on every project that I do, specifically because I don't have a joiner. The way that I set it up, I set the board about where it'll touch the blade, and I move the fence over, but I keep level set right here. What I'm going to do is run the board and the fence together through here to give me a straight edge on this side of the board. Earplugs. Now that we have a straight edge ripped along each board, we're going to cut these down to the exact width that we want. So right now we're going to rip everything down to width. If you know anything by now, you know that these aren't true to measurement. These are supposed to be 2x8s. They're actually 1.5 by 7.5. I'm going to rip this down to 6 7/8 inches wide. These 2x8s, and they will be the base for my planter box. I know it's confusing, but it's the system that we have. Like, why couldn't you just give us an actual 2-inch by 8-inch board? I don't know. Then they call the actual dimensional lumber that's actually dimensional, they call that rough cut. I don't know. 6 7/8 earplugs. So the 2x6s, we ripped those down to 5 inches wide, and these are the pieces that we're going to use for the hexagon, the hexagonal, hexagon? These are the pieces that we're going to use for the hexagons. Again, you want to use that straight edge for reference. You don't just want to run the wood through the saw all willy-nilly and then come out looking like a dummy when you get to do screwing down the, I look like a dummy because I don't have a script to read. Hey, the wood's done. Nice and straight. All right, so now we have all the pieces ripped to width. We still need to take care of the ends that are not square. Now you can get away with only cutting one end. Just make sure you pull your measurement from that end and not the end that you don't lop off. Now, I'm sure you can see we still have wood that is bowed. That's not that big of a problem. I'm going to show you how to fix that or to work around it. Now the reason we jointed the length of these before we square the ends is because if we didn't have a flat surface to reference against the fence, we still wouldn't have square wood. You would be referencing the bow and you wouldn't be referencing a good straight surface. So I'm going to lop all these down. All I'm going to do is rip off about 1/8 of an inch off of each end, to make sure we're square on this side, and we're going to keep going with the actual build. And I'm not going to bore you with miter saw cutaways. I'm going to do this and I'll get back to you. So without boring you, we have all of the ends squared. I need my pencil. Where's my freaking pencil, man? So without boring you, we have all of our ends squared on all of the pieces, and we have our wood properly milled. We're ready to go and start making our cuts. The first thing we're going to do is cut the planter box base, and I'm cutting the length at 64 inches. And then the width of the box will be the remaining cutoff of the 2x8, which should come out to 2 foot. There may be a little give and take, but because remember, we squared this in, we may have cut a little more off than we did. Just make sure you're, oh my gosh. Just make sure your boards are the same width. It's a simple box. We're going to do the planter box first, and then we're going to do the rest of the pieces. This video, by the way, is sponsored by heat and humidity. It's hot. Jeez, I'm peach, man. 64 inches. There's my mark. Dude. There we go. I'm not throwing a fit. One thing to note, when you pull a measurement from that side to here, when you make your cut, if you made your mark right on the 64-inch mark, you want to make your cut. If this is my line, I want to make my cut on the opposite side of the line. Let me show you. You see this mark? If I was to cut directly on the line, I would be off by 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. Instead, I need to make sure that I put the blade on the opposite side of the measurement line that I pulled from. So because I pulled from that side, the blade needs to be on this side. I just recorded a whole segment and forgot to turn my microphone on. I showed you, believe it or not, how to take the bow out of the wood, and then I couldn't find another board to reenact it with. This is the best one I got. The other one had more of a bow. It's a much better freaking example, but I forgot to turn on the microphone. So, you see the bow in the wood. What we're going to do is we're going to come to the point where the bow starts, about right here, and we'll add a little bit of length to it. This isn't the perfect solution, but for this project, it worked. I'm just going to cut it. That's going to give me all this length on this side of straight wood, and then the bow is going to be so insignificant on this piece when I use it on the table saw that it's not going to make that much of a difference. Observe. Okay, so now you can see this board here is straight-ish. It's construction grade lumber. I hate it, but it's as straight as you're going to get it. This board here, even though there's a bow, it's not going to make that much of a difference. This is where the bow starts. My miter saw isn't quite level, so that's why there's that. The bow is over here, but it's not that much. So now I've made this easier to work with. I've made the bow super... Man, if I can get a grasp of the English language. I made the bow a lot less significant. So what I'm doing right now, I'm going to cut down all the other 2x6s that we have. I'm just going to make them into more manageable pieces that I can use on the table saw. I don't want 10 foot of stick out when I'm cutting a 14-foot piece. That's going to be hard to deal with, and that's going to be very unsafe to cut out all of our short angle pieces for the hexagon. And so there's no real exact measurement. Oh, I should have just did one at a freaking time. No exact measurement of how I'm breaking these down. I figure, good Lord, come on. I figure my pieces are going to be 14 inches long for the short hexagon pieces. So let's say 14 times 4, 56. I'm just going to pull it roughly a little more than 56, and I'm going to cut it. I'm not too concerned about waste right now. If you are, then maybe pull out your measurements or figure out a more efficient way to cut your pieces. So as you can see, these are cut to no specific length, but I'm going to break these down into as many 14-inch pieces as I can, but they need to be 14 inches at a 30-degree opposing angle on each end, and that's how we're going to make the hexagon. The hexagon at the corner is 60 degrees. We need to cut these at 30 degrees. It's pretty simple. I actually thought it'd be more complicated than that. Yeah, 30 degrees opposing angle, 30 degrees opposing angle on each end. So now get ready for the cutting montage. Oh, I shouldn't hold the light. I'm dealing with like a work light from a light. My lighting is terrible. But let me get you set up. Sorry if I'm out of breath and it's gross. The dust buildup is absolutely insane, but we're setting up to do the hexagon pieces. Now I do have a digital miter gauge, but the battery was dead, and I could not find another battery, and I could not bring myself to rob my children's toys of their AAA batteries, mainly because I couldn't find one with a AAA battery. But here we are, we're cutting the wood out. It was enough wood to have 8 solid hexagons and 1/2 of a hexagon, and I had enough that I actually made a few mistakes on some other pieces that I didn't need. So I had more than I needed when I was cutting these pieces out. And as you can see, it's just repetitive cut after cut, but it's so much better to do this on the table saw where you can have these repetitive cuts set up and you can really just run through it very quickly. Well, shoot. I messed up. Let's see if you can see it. So, looks great. Looks great. But we have a gap. Come on, focus, gap, and gap. So these 2 joints look good. These 2 joints look good. It's when I get to this piece right here, there's a gap. I may have been a little off on an angle. That's what it looks like. Here's what I'm about to do. I'm going to call it a night. It's late in the evening. I'm going to go get cleaned up and wrap my head around how to fix this. I'm sure if I'm coming across it, plenty of you have or will as well. We're going to come up with a solution to fix this that I can do tomorrow, because today is not a good day for it. You're so tall. Oh, I'm done for the day. I'm done for the day. I figured it out. I wanted to give you good information, so I figured it out off of camera, thinking that I would have the same issue with all of the pieces. I only had that issue with one of the hexagons. It's actually the one on top. It's a little bit off. That's the only one I had the issue with. The rest of them, this one's still strapped up, no screws. They're coming out just perfect, no gaps or anything. And that's because we milled the wood. I am, however, going to show you how I fixed the problem. And it was super easy. So even though I figured it out off camera, even though none of the other hexagons are having that issue, I'm still going to show you how I fixed it. So let's pretend that this gap was still here. What I did was I screwed So pretend we have the gap. What I did was I screwed the 2 halves together. Undo your ratchet strap. So we had the 2 halves. The next thing I did, took some blocks, spread it so I could put this one up on blocks and overlay the other half where the inside corners met, but the off angle covered the bottom. Where's my freaking pencil? Took a pencil, traced it. Then I take this over to the miter saw. But we don't use the miter saw. Just watch, just bear with me. This is how you could fix it if you had the same issue. Okay, so we're at the miter saw. I took the piece, set it against the fence. I moved the miter saw until I found exactly where the blade lined up with the mark that I had. For this one, it's at 30 degrees because this one's correct. The one that I messed up on, I was down to 25 degrees. That gave me my angle, but I didn't want to make the cut here. I know now that I was off by 5 degrees, so I set my table saw up to 25 degrees. And so when I set my table saw up to 25 degrees, I butt the angle against the blade to where the blade would make a cut all the way through, but taking off as little material as possible. Then I move the fence against the wood. If you don't have one of these fancy sliders, that's fine. Just take a piece of scrap wood and clamp it to the fence and use that, but make sure you back it off of the blade. So I lined up the blade to 25 degrees. I can't get my thoughts together, man. So I had to make a 25-degree cut on this end and this end, only on one piece. The other half, I left it alone. Took off as little material as possible until I made the cut all the way up and set my fence to that position, made my cut, and then I flipped it over and made this cut. So I took off the exact same amount of material on each side to make it even. I only had to cut one half. The other half, I left it alone, and it butted up just perfect, and it fixed the gap that I had on the first piece. And it surprised the mess out of me when all the other ones that came out fine. I only had that issue on one of them. And that's the benefit of milling the wood before you get started on this. Now, to hold it together, ratchet strap. This tightens everything up and makes it a lot easier to do your screws. And I know every woodworker has a ratchet strap, because how else are you holding wood in the back of your truck? And let's go start to finish on one of the hexagons. I start out by laying out all my pieces, roughly how they go. Hopefully the rain will hold off just long enough to knock this one out. Take a ratchet strap, tighten the bad boy down. So all my joints fairly tight. No issues. My other battery's dead, so I'm using a driver to do the countersink holes. I go through and do a countersink. So I'm doing 2 screws per board, or 2 screws per joint on each end. I countersink them first, and I'm using 2.5-inch screws, and that's plenty of screw to use for this. It's not going to be load bearing. It's not going to split the wood, especially if you pre-drill your holes before you just shove a screw through there. Now, if you've made it this far, then you like the content. You should really like and subscribe. It really does help the channel. I'm trying to put out as much quality content as I can. I know, there's room for improvement. Trust me, I am working on the improvements. If anybody knows what improvements need to be made, comment below, because I have no idea what improvements I need to make to the channel. Audio is obviously one. Now that our hexagons are built, we're ready to build the most simple part of the project, and that is the box. One thing to take in note, we're dealing with construction grade lumber. There's going to be a lot of knots. You want to try your best not to screw into a knot. You're going to crack that wood. It's not going to hold. So you want to use the other parts of the wood. You do not want to screw into the knot. But to do the box, it's just as simple as laying it out. If you get all the crap out the way, and screwing it down. Another improvement that I will give you. I concede I need better lighting. I am working on it. We are where we are. But alas, I can't quit putting out quality content just because you can't see it. So I'm just screwing this down preliminarily. Okay, so that's going to be a lot of weight for this box to support. But what I'm thinking about doing is some braces going this way for the bottom of the box. I would do them lengthways, but I'm trying to only use the material I bought for this project and only have those 2 boards left, and they're not long enough to go on the inside of this box, but I think I have enough to do 4 braces, specifically 2 on the ends and then 2 in the middle where this piece will fall out. We'll do the 2 braces right there in the middle where I want this piece to sit. Now this is 28 5/8 inches long for the inside, and we're going to cut that on the table saw. To finish my point, the other improvement, I guess, would be scripting, because I had no idea I was about to start talking when I interrupted myself in the video. Now, doing the voiceovers is crashing my computer, so I'm trying to do this all in one take. Otherwise, it just adds to so much more freaking time sitting in front of the computer editing. I really got to improve a lot of room for improvements on all aspects of the channel. So here, I'm just using pocket holes to make these attachments. It really helped to shore up the box and make sure it's able to support the weight of the hexagons. Now, I'm using 3/8 inch roundover. I'm doing the inside and outside edges of the boxes and all the hexagons. You do not want to use treated lumber for this, as some people will like to use this to grow vegetables. And I don't know if you know this, but treated lumber, specifically chemically treated lumber, will leach into the soil and it'll make the vegetables poisonous, or it'll have just adverse effects, and you don't want to be liable for that. You don't want people spreading lies about your business saying that you're poisoning the community simply because you're trying to give them a quality product. So the 3/8 inch roundover, it's not really necessary. I just like making as much improvement, making it as aesthetically pleasing as possible. This piece here, I did not film how to cut it, but it was a 60-degree cut at the bottom where it ties into the box, and then I just screwed it back into the piece that it was originally screwed into. I did all the roundovers. I didn't really do any sanding. The only areas I sanded was just to take off the mill marks. And now I'm just setting everything in place, making it look as good as possible. Now, I did kind of change the arrangement a little bit. You'll see that at the end. But I'm just screwing everything down, 2.5 inch screws, and that's plenty. And I'm doing about 2 screws going each direction in every connection as possible, just until I felt comfortable with it. And that is it. I have seen on Pinterest where some people take and they'll put shelves in front of here. I didn't have the extra wood for that. So if you wanted to add another board or two, you could do some shelves, you could do some hooks, you could do things like that. We just haven't decided where we're going to use it at the house yet, so I haven't added anything to it. So the way that it works, you put dirt in the box, obviously. You go flowers, and you just put little pots of plants everywhere that kind of hang down. However you want to do it to stage it. But the trick to it is you want to make it look like something that somebody wants on their property. So one other thing while I stage this for a thumbnail. This is untreated wood, so you do want to put some kind of a finish on it. I haven't decided what that finish is going to be for me just yet. But I do like putting tung oil on exterior projects like this. Now let's get the angle right. Thumbnail 101. Hello.
Hey, Marcus.
Oh, I'm getting freaking spam calls like freaking nobody's business. I haven't decided what thumbnail would work best. And it's getting hot in this shop. You see what we go through? Oh, do you see what we go through? What YouTubers go through? Specifically unfamous YouTubers. Oh, wait. Now we got to do the face, because faces get more views apparently. Let's get more of it.